Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the fifth installment in my It's Good to Gamble series, The Return to Sports. If you haven't checked out my 4 previous episodes, the link will be in the description box below to catch up on the series. We are in a very interesting time in society as we are dealing with 2 pandemics, COVID and racism. COVID has put the sports world on pause for these last couple of months, and we as sports fans, well, we've been itching for some content to get us through our daily lives. However, with the racial divide going on in the country and fears of a second and third wave of COVID, the return to sports can be deemed a huge gamble that can backfire. There are many reasons why these sports will want to rush back, and that is because these sports make a lot of money, and this can have a huge effect on corporations and future salary caps. Sports has always been a big part of society through the worst of times. But looking into the time we are at now in society, is it smart for these sports to return? Ladies and gentlemen, sometimes it's good to gamble and go to Vegas. Just make sure you return home with all your clothes on. The documented history of sports goes back to at least 3,000 years. Ancient Greece introduced us to the first Olympic Games, which took place in 776 BC, which included foot and chariot races, wrestling, and jumping. The gymnasium was strictly men and boys and no females allowed, much different than what we see today. The games were held every 4 years since that point. Winning these competitions was a big deal, as these players will receive benefits like free meals for life and many other things. Gladiator fighting were the bloodiest of them all. The bloody fights were loved by the Romans because it embodied the moral ethics of Rome. Fast forward a bit, and sports was introduced to America when baseball was brought by the first settlers who arrived in the 17th century. Ever since then, sports have been a huge influencer in America. Player activism seems to be a huge part in the sports world right now. Kyrie Irving shocked the world when he publicly opposed the return of the NBA season, saying, "I don't support going into Orlando. I'm not with the systemic racism and the bullshit. Something smells a little fishy. I'm willing to give up everything for social reform." This caused a bit of a split among NBA players who were up in the air about returning to action. Avery Bradley and Dwight Howard also released statements in support of Kyrie Irving. I said previously on one of my radio shows, In the Huddle, I like Kyrie Irving's idea. I just don't like him being the messenger, simply because he wasn't going to play anyway. Kyrie Irving wasn't a leader on the court when he played for the Celtics or in his first stint on the Nets, so how can he be a leader off the court? Yes, all that is true, but we can't deny that Kyrie Irving has a point. African American players should use their influence to get their messages across to spark change. WNBA player Maya Moore showed what it really is to use your platform to make change. In the prime of her career, Maya Moore took the ultimate sacrifice by taking a year off to help Jonathan Irons, who was sentenced to a 50-year sentence in a Missouri state prison for a burglary and assault he didn't commit. He wouldn't have been eligible for parole for another 20 years, and said he would never admit guilt because of his innocence. Throughout his prison time, Irons began educating himself behind bars and is a religious man. Nevertheless, because of the help of Maya Moore, Irons is now a free man.
Yes, it's done. I'm just checking. Okay, y'all.
Hey, how's it feel? Come here. How's it feel? Tell us, how's it feel? One sentence.
Life. I feel like I can live life now, man. I'm free. I'm blessed. I just want to live a life worthy. Live my life worthy of God's help and influence and just provision in my life, and He made this possible. I thank everybody that supported me, my her family, and just to be home, to have someone to be home. I'm so grateful.
It seems like this is a popular movement these days, whereas it wasn't popular back then when solo acts like Muhammad Ali, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Colin Kaepernick, and LeBron stood on their own.
Shortly put, are the black Muslims taking you for a ride?
I said not black Muslims, Muslims.
I beg your pardon, are the Muslims taking you for a ride?
No, the white people have been taking us for a ride for the past 400 years in America. The Muslims are straightening me up and teaching me the truth and saving my life so that I can see the hereafter. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad teaches us the religion of Islam, and I will die for it and give everything. But as far as taking me for a ride is concerned, I've been the one that was taking me for a ride and still taking my people for a ride is the white people.
Tell me, champ, would you have been prepared to go into the army if it hadn't been for the Vietnam War?
No, under no conditions do we take part in wars to take lives of other humans.
Muhammad Ali went toe-to-toe with the federal government when he refused to enter the Vietnam War. His reasoning was he refused to kill people who looked like him for a country that cared nothing about him. Muhammad Ali had to sacrifice some of his years in the sport of boxing because of his integrity. Same thing we see today with Colin Kaepernick, who's still without a job after kneeling during the national anthem to protest police brutality.
It's to bring awareness and make people, realize what's really going on in this country. There are a lot of things that are going on that are unjust, people aren't being held accountable for, and that's something that needs to change. That's something that, this country stands for freedom, liberty, justice for all. And it's not happening for all right now.
It was even unpopular for Spike Lee when he dropped Do the Right Thing, addressing these issues. Spike Lee was labeled an angry black man for his political messages in these movies. But Do the Right Thing was on the money and is still relatable till today. And not only was Do the Right Thing on the money when it comes to police brutality, it also foreshadowed gentrification. Now, more than ever, players are recognizing their influence and are using it at a time when it's needed. The murders of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and Rayshard Brooks by the hands of law enforcement and racists has caused a national uproar. There were a lot of looting and rioting. Not to mention that there are still people being lynched across the country. Yes, people, there are people being lynched. Last week, a noose was found in Bubba Wallace, the only African-American NASCAR driver's garage, which also caused an uproar. As it turned out, the FBI investigated it, and it was just only a rope. Let us remember the Confederate flag was recently just banned from NASCAR events. Respected college football head coaches Mike Gundy and Dabo Swinney caught flack for wearing branded t-shirts at inconvenient times. Dabo wore a Football Matters t-shirt in light of the Black Lives Matter movement, and Mike Gundy wore an Owen t-shirt, a right-sided news network that happened to be against the Black Lives Matter movement. I don't have a problem with both guys wearing these shirts on a normal day, but because of what's going on right now, could you find it within your heart to at least wear a plain white t-shirt or something? Do your laundry? I don't know. See, I won't be surprised to see some African-American recruits take their talents to HBCUs. I believe the player empowerment will transfer to the collegiate level. The Washington Redskins have felt the pressure from people to change their team name as it is deemed a racial slur towards the Native Americans. These complaints have been going on forever. Back in 2013, the team owners said, "We'll never change that name," It's that simple. Never you can use caps. However, with prominent sponsors like FedEx and Nike beginning to back away from the team's name, the pressure was put on the Redskins to at least consider changing the name. Commissioner Roger Goodell said that the league has been discussing a change with the team, and since then, the team have released a statement saying they will do a thorough review of the team name. The Cleveland Indians may be changing their names as well after 105 years. The Cleveland Indians released a statement saying, "We are committed to making a positive impact in our community and embrace our responsibilities to advance social justice and equality." If history repeats itself, then we are going to be in for a ride when it comes to a potential second and third wave of this pandemic. During the great influenza pandemic of 1918, the second wave was much worse than the first. Florida recently smashed COVID case records with nearly 9,000 positive cases last Thursday. There were 1,000 new cases of COVID confirmed in Orange County alone, which is more than the report in the entire state of New York. Guess what, guys? This is where the NBA will be resuming its season in a bubble in Orlando on July 30th. It was just reported that 16 out of the 302 players that were tested for the disease tested positive. At least 37 Clemson players tested positive since returning to campus. Morehouse College recently just canceled its fall sports due to the coronavirus fears. With the lack of leadership in college football, I think the best case scenario for the season will be a delayed season. Every conference pretty much does its own thing and play by their own rules. There's no leader in college football. Who do we look to? Nick Saban? One of the most selfish things I have ever seen in sports history was the MLB players and owners going back and forth publicly about money and full prorated salaries. Keep in mind, there are people that don't even know where their next meal is coming from during this crisis. There are people that are waiting on food lines during these crises and working on the front lines, taking pay cuts. Everybody in their prospective jobs have had to take a pay cut or an altered schedule if they ain't get laid off by now. It's obvious without the money generated by fan attendance and concessions, you're gonna take a pay cut. So it baffles my mind that the players showed no signs of wanting to take a pay cut. Nevertheless, Rob Manfred and the league stepped in, implementing a 60-game season that will run through September 27th. This type of shortened season will favor teams with experienced pitching, and teams cannot afford to get off to a slow start. Let us remember last season, the Washington Nationals were 19-31 at one point before turning their season around and winning the World Series. Now, that can't happen. Mike Trout, the Los Angeles Angels 3-time MVP, is regarded as the greatest player in baseball history, but remains very pessimistic about playing the season. Not to mention that his wife is expecting their first baby in August. Mike Trout said, "Honestly, I still don't feel comfortable with the baby coming," he said on a Zoom call before the Angels workout. "There's a lot of things on my mind. I'm trying to be the safest and most cautious to get through the season. It's going to be tough. We're playing it by ear," Trout said. "I think the biggest thing is this is our first child and I got to be there. If I test positive, I can't see the baby for 14 days, which would be an upset. I've got to keep Jess safe. I've got to keep the baby safe. I try to talk to my wife every night about this. I know I'm risking myself. I can meet somebody and get the virus. If the best player in the sport decides not to play, then that would be a huge problem for the sport of baseball, who's trying to make its way back to the top of the sports mountain. For selfish reasons, I would love to see my favorite sport, America's #1 sport, football, return for its season. For selfish reasons, I want to see my favorite quarterback of all time, the GOAT, Tom Brady, have a wonderful year with those Buccaneers out in Tampa, perhaps winning the Super Bowl. However, for those same selfish reasons, Tom Brady keeps practicing with Bucs teammates despite COVID-19 going up in Florida. Florida is indeed a hot spot for a spike in these cases. But Brady appeared to throw back at his critics over workouts, saying the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Well, I don't know about you, brother. You're my guy and all. You're my favorite quarterback and all. But we gotta fear this virus as well. It'd be really a shame if Tom Brady is the reason why we don't have football this year, for selfish reasons. The NBA will be finishing the rest of the season starting on July 30th in a bubble in Disney World. These people will have to follow strict guidelines and rules during this time period. The thing that confuses me the most about the NBA's plan is instead of just bringing 16 teams that would have been in if the season ended today, they added 6 more teams to that mix. 22 teams in all in the bubble. I wonder if trying to get Zion Williamson in the playoffs had a lot to do with that. Zion brings in lots and lots of revenue, and right now the Pelicans are on the 10th seed. Adding more teams is making this an even bigger gamble. We have to keep in mind that the workers in this bubble still have to go home in the hot spot in Florida, and cooks who could be sick could be cooking food at the hotel, serving up 2 coronavirus dinners. Based on Anthony Fauci's latest comments saying football needs a bubble format to play in 2020, a potential football season is a big gamble. We all know it's impossible for football to adopt such bubble format with the amount of coaches and players on each team. I honestly believe this leaves the NBA with the best shot to make this work out of the group, although there's a risk factor in that. With Avery Bradley opting out of the NBA start because of his son's respiratory illness, it would be interesting to see how this impacts LeBron James' chances of winning another championship. And also, how much stock are we putting into this season anyway, based on these circumstances? Kevin Durant, who announced he would be sitting out early in the month, said he would have likely skipped the NBA restart even if he was healthy. And I honestly don't blame KD, because you're asking these players to be away from their families for months in hard living conditions. Fred VanVleet said it sucks having to choose between social justice and returning to the NBA. One industry that has been altered in a world without sports is the sports betting industry. With the casinos shut, gambling addicts have been driven online to place bets. Now, as sports slowly return, so will sports betting. Sports betting insider Nick Costo said, and I quote, "I think the gambling space is going to come out of this pandemic almost stronger than it was going into it. States are going to legalize it because they need the revenue. You're going to have lots of people betting on sports, maybe more than ever before." I totally agree with Nick here, because in the wake of this pandemic, the potential revenue from betting will boost these states and local economies. It's not a secret why any politician would want to legalize sports betting in the future, because that's a money grab. New York Andrew Cuomo once hesitated on the legalization of sports gambling in the past, but when asked about the state's $13 billion deficit, he said he would support the legalization of both marijuana and mobile sports betting. Look at it like this. Colorado was the first state to legalize marijuana and is profiting off a billion-dollar industry. America is built on capitalism, and if there's money to be made, things will get done. That's why the rush back to sports is in motion. This return to sports is more about the generating profit than it is giving us some entertainment during these crucial times. Ladies and gentlemen, it's good to gamble. Sometimes.